Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Rod Bradley. He's a veteran journalist, transdimensional communication practitioner, and author of The Monk's Path, a tale of reincarnation, sacred promises, and ancient vows. In this episode, we'll discuss the mysteries of reincarnation, transdimensional communication, and faith that raises the question, are we truly free, or are we bound by promises made long ago? Rod, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Johnny. It's good to speak to you.
Now, you got involved with transdimensional communication, which we'll refer to as TDC, a while back. When did that first happen?
That first happened in 2005, 20 years ago, completely by accident. I was listening to a recording on an old little cassette machine, a Walkman, and a voice appeared that was nothing to do with what I was listening to. And it said, "Thank God I walk without them pills." Now, immediately my thoughts went to my father, who died 3 years earlier. And during the latter years of his life, he had a lot of medical problems and was taking an awful lot of pills every morning just to get going. So I thought, that's interesting. Didn't prove anything. But then a little bit further on in the tape, I heard another voice that said, "My hands work. Hear me, Rick." Now, Rick is a shortening of Roderick, which my dad called me as a youngster. And for 2 or 3 years before he died, his hands, he couldn't pick up a cup, he couldn't pick up a book. So to hear the words, "My hands work, hear me, Rick," it could only be from one person, really. And that's the way it all began.
And this is on a Walkman?
Yeah, just a little Walkman. That's all it was. As I say, I'm a journalist and I record interviews with people, and it just appeared. And after that, I thought, could I do this again? Could I follow this up? So I tried my own little experiment, not expecting much. So I asked him who he was with, sort of question I suppose everybody asks in that sort of situation. The answer came through very clear to me. Eric's up here with me. Well, Eric was his brother who had died 17 years earlier. So all of a sudden, I'd got an answer to a question, and that's when I thought, I'm really onto something here.
I would say so. TDC, EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, or interdimensional communication. Are they all the same thing, or are there similarities? How does that all work?
Yeah, they're close cousins. I have found with EVP, you turn on a recording device and record whatever might be there and listen to it afterwards. With TDC, I found it works better if there's a psychic medium or somebody at least sensitive to the psychic realms present.
I imagine you are, correct?
Yes, so I'm told. Although I don't practice as a psychic medium, but I've been told that through TDC. And I pick up voices not only through ambient noise, I guess, like EVP, but also I can pick them off riding off the back of the human voice, off white noise, running water, slamming doors, any noise really, because basically it seems as if these entities manipulate all kinds of sounds to communicate.
Are they hidden frequencies of sorts, or is that something completely different?
You know, sometimes I've left the recording machine on and I've been banging around in the kitchen making a cup of tea. And I've left it on and I've come back and I've found messages where the banging was. So somehow they manipulate sound. Don't ask me how they do this. but that's what happens, and it is quite bizarre. I'm a natural skeptic. It takes a lot to convince me.
I am as well, no question about that. There is a certain amount of skepticism that surrounds things like EVP and transdimensional communication. I know very little about what it conjures, at least for me, as communication across the veil. And therefore, if someone is able to do that, then they're considered a psychic or medium of some degree. Am I right?
To some degree, yes. To some degree, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a rabbit hole in itself. But
yes,
how do you address the skepticism of people that will say, well, how do you know it's real? Even though the messages seem to have some evidential value, like your dad and your uncle.
I think all I can do is ask them to listen and make up their own minds. I'm not evangelical about this. I'm not trying to persuade anybody. I'm just sort of saying, this has happened to me. And it's not in the reality I was previously in. It's moved me somewhere else.
The Monk's Tale, does it have recordings where the listener can actually listen to
It does. There's a website, rodbradley.uk, and there'll be quite a few on there that people can just go and listen to. Should buy the book to get that address, but everybody knows now, I'm telling you.
There you go. The cat's out of the bag. I like that. So speaking of the book, it's described as a tale of reincarnation. Do you have past life memories?
I do. And for many years, I thought of them like fears and phobias. I didn't realise what was going. And interests. For instance, I went out to Sicily where this past life was supposed to be. And before going, I had repeated dreams of castle battlements covered in snow. When I got there, we discovered these castle battlements at the monastery we were heading for. But it wasn't a castle. It took just 3 or 4 steps to get up onto this platform. It had got castle battlements, but it held 4 wells that the monks used to use to raise water. But the view from the battlements is identical to my dreams, and that kind of blew me away. And walking into the monastery, I'd had dreams and had drawn, which impressed my wife, pictures of the path going down and the arches. And they were there. I'm not a great fan of snow. I love looking at it on Christmas cards, but it kind of worries me. And I discovered later on in the research that I actually died in snow. So that kind of made sense. When we were there, we were in a little village in southern Sicily, and I had a dream of some rocks where I was fishing. And I told my wife the morning after, less than an hour later, we found the rocks, and they were exactly as described. Now, my wife reckons I was born there. She might have been going over the top there, but it happened. And it was sort of instantaneous memory of that.
So in this lifetime, to recall the memory, did you have to undergo like a past life regression?
No.
How did you do it?
I tried past life regression, didn't work on me at all. Nothing. What began the trail to Sicily was I started a little group up in 2014 to do more research on TDC. I invited 3 people round. I'd advertised, didn't know any of these people, and the one lady turned up and she was a psychic medium. I didn't know this. And before she'd crossed the threshold into my home, she said to me, "There's a monk with you. He hasn't got a hood, but he looks like a monk to me. He's ancient." That was the start of a relationship that got weirder and weirder. A few months later, she turned up at my home with a scrap of paper, literally the back of an envelope. She had been woken, she said, in the middle of the night with lots of names and phrases. She said, "These are for you. They're about your monk." So I'm like, okay, what do I do with these? So I researched them and eventually found they were all to do with Sicily. They were all to do with a certain part of Sicily. And it all began to come together with Pauline, the medium. Other people had actually seen this monk years before, back in 1983. That's when he was first seen.
With past life memories, often the experiencer recognizes people in their current life that they shared a past life before, and I believe you had a similar experience. Tell us about that.
I did. That was with my stepdaughter, Sarah. One of the first clues to that, after we'd returned from Sicily, we were telling Sarah about it, showing her pictures, and we were recording the conversation to see if there was anything on there. But while we were doing that, she actually said, because I said, "You should have come with us." And she says, "Oh no," she said, "I've had nightmares of dying in a volcanic eruption all my life, even when I was a little girl." And she still has them now. The death I was supposed to have had in that life was asphyxiation from the gases from a volcanic eruption. The TDCs that came through from my wife speaking, which were very clear, were, "Sarah has died with you, I see her shadow." And that was horrendous, that Sarah's body found in a cavern. Now, this was coming from somewhere else, because she obviously didn't know any of this or would never suggest this consciously. And after a little bit of digging, I discovered that during volcanic eruptions on Mount Etna in Sicily, people used to hide in caves and caverns that had been created by previous eruptions. But if it was a particularly big eruption, and in 1669, when I was supposed to be there, it was one of the biggest on record, people could die from toxic gases and would asphyxiate. So there was starting to become a link here of Sarah's fear, her mother coming through with the TDC statements that she died with me, and she died in a cavern. And it sort of started to grow from there with Sarah. She doesn't do this for a living or anything, but she's quite psychic. Very sensitive girl. I remember showing her a photo of the monastery we were led to in Sicily, and there was a vineyard. We were told to look for a vineyard, and there was a path that went right up the vineyard into some woods at the end. And when I was out there with my wife, I said, "I want to go up that path." It was just one of those that you think, "I've got to see what's at the end." And when we showed Sarah, her first words were, "I want to go up that path." So there was sort of things happening.
So who were you in that life, and did you learn this via TDC or otherwise, like a recollection of that past life?
A little bit of a mix. I was a monk, a Franciscan monk in that life. I'd been told about this by Pauline, the psychic medium. I'd picked things up on TDC over the years to do with having a Christian background. Although I'm not Christian in this life as such, there was this constant messages about Christianity. But the thing that really made me think there's something going on here, I was listening to a radio programme on the BBC. I was recording this programme because it was something I was really interested in. It was about music. And in between the presenter and somebody speaking, there was a silence. And in between that silence, a voice said, "Remember you're a monk." Now, this is on the website I've just shown you. And it was so clear and so definite, it just sent chills down me. Because it was just there in the silence. And it was then, I think, when I heard that, it wasn't just... I mean, Pauline is a wonderful psychic medium. I've spoken to wonderful psychic mediums. But I'm not always convinced, if you know what I mean. I'm always looking for, could anybody say, yes, that's happened to me? And could it be telepathy? All that kind of thing. Telepathy itself is just as impressive when you think about it. But when I heard "Remember You're a Monk," that's when everything changed for me. And I realised that there was something going on.
So you heard a voice that clearly said, "Remember you're a monk," and that's when I guess things clicked and you thought, okay,
yeah.
Now we're getting somewhere. How long has it been that psychics and mediums and such have used TDC to bolster the authenticity of their work and their findings?
Psychics don't. It's just that I've spoken to psychics and I've recorded them and I've picked those up. I think, like you were saying, there's a little bit of distrust with EVP and TDC, and psychics have got their own abilities to bring it through, but it's when I've recorded psychic mediums. If you record a psychic medium, the good ones, it's very good for picking up voices. If they're psychic, they can be very good.
It seems to me that could definitely help a medium in their work, if nothing else, just to reaffirm that what they're doing isn't just a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. There is some substance to that, it would appear, because we're talking about audio. I guess a skeptic could say, oh, well, you just made that up. I mean, God knows with the advent of AI these days, you can make up anything. Yeah. Speaking of which, that's going to make it even harder to overcome the skeptics' objections, but that's probably a discussion for another day. But it seems that this could be a very useful tool. In your experience, is there any way to really use the audio recordings that you pick up by recording psychics and dispel any notion of this was artificially made or constructed?
I think it would take the skeptic to be there at the time and then to see how it works. So I would record a psychic medium, find what voices are there, and they would be able to see for themselves. But like you say, today with AI, I hadn't thought about that, but that's another one, isn't it? That's another problem nowadays. And because some of the voices seem so clear and so good, I'll be quite honest, if I was hearing them, I would doubt it. Which is a bit of a problem, but I would. I think, yeah, okay, maybe would probably be my response, but I wouldn't necessarily accept it all.
Okay. So you had a mystical experience. I believe this is in 2017 that's related to Christian prayer.
It was, yeah.
Even though you're not a Christian. Tell us about that.
Yeah. At the time, my younger stepdaughter, Charlotte, she was in a bad way. She was suffering from all sorts of psychological problems, let's say that. And her mother and I were thinking, what can we do? We thought we'd tried everything. I was home one night, I was on my own. And I was feeling desperate, to be honest. So for 20 minutes, I walked round my dining room talking to Jesus. I thought, well, if I am supposed to be a monk, go straight to the top. So I just did that and I poured my heart out. Nothing happened. I didn't expect anything to happen. But then I went to bed and I was awoken at 2 o'clock in the morning in an utter state of bliss. I can't describe it. But it was just that nothing comes close to what I experienced that morning in this state of bliss. I went back to sleep. Immediately, I woke up again in an utter state of bliss. This time, I had to go to the bathroom. And if ever there's a Guinness Book of Records for finding God in the bathroom, I've got to be in with a shout. Because I'm standing there doing what nature demands you do, and I'm in this utter state of bliss. And then I went back to bed, fell asleep again till about 7 when I started the day. And people have said to me, well, Was your prayer answered? Was the problem sorted out? And no, it got worse, actually. The prayer wasn't answered, but it was almost like somebody was there saying, we've got you back. You're not on your own. That's the best reason I can come for what happened, because it was an utter state of bliss. And it was in response to a prayer. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't think prayers worked. And I don't think they've worked for me since. But that night, it actually worked, and I had a response. And it was magical. It was quite magical. And that was another persuasion, actually, that, okay, maybe I was a monk, because there's this Christian link that keeps coming back in. I remember when I would have been 21, 22, I actually had this calling to become a priest. I didn't go to church, didn't read the Bible. That didn't seem to bother me at the time. It lasted for about a year. And I've always thought, where did that come from? Because at the time, I was looking and searching like a lot of people are, but I was into Zen Buddhism. And I've suddenly got this pull to become a priest. Luckily, I didn't go through with it. That could have been bad news for a lot of Christians, I think, if I'd have become a priest. But there was that pull. And that's another thing to do with this past life.
Speaking of which, the title that has to do with sacred promises and ancient vows.
Yeah.
Does that have to do with, I would imagine, being in the in-between space and deciding on your next incarnation and the pre-birth planning, or is that related to something else?
It's actually related to something else, although that's involved with it. I separated from my wife in 2020. Neither of us wanted to separate. There was no infidelity or abuse, but it was something to do with the younger daughter that she couldn't cope with everything. She was sort of on overload. And we separated. And we used to meet for coffee and lunch. And the one day I was sitting and I said, can I record you? She said, yes. So we've had this conversation. And I find my wife, this time in reverse on the recording, saying, I can't remember. Will I be seeing you a lot? Now, all of a sudden, I'm thinking, what does that mean? You can't remember? That suggests there's some sort of plan, some sort of script. In her current state, she couldn't pick that up. But she knew there was something there. And I think that's where the destiny thing really came in for me. There was another one that was quite disturbing, well, for me, where she says, Rod, you let it happen to me. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, what? When? Because I don't recall doing anything as if I'd done something dreadful. Was this to do with a former life, or had I done something I didn't know? All of this suggested me that, at least to some degree, our lives are scripted. I think we can do little rewrites, but I think along the path there are certain things that have to happen.
The in-between space, in between incarnations, where many different people that have had that experience in that space where it's like casting a movie. It's like casting a stage play.
Yeah.
So did you have experience, or do you have a memory of being in that space where there was pre-birth planning actually happening?
Not the pre-birth planning. I've been told by mediums and through TDC that I am coming back to fix something. One medium, Tracy her name was, said to me, have you been in the 1600s or remember it? Have you got a past life or memory link that triggers you from that time? Because something's happening now that's been triggered by that life. And I had that message in different ways from various people. And that I apparently have got a spirit guide who was also a monk, who was a friend in that lifetime. And another medium, again a Tracy, but this time with an E, said to me, you're inspired by someone as well. You see, I haven't got a religious bone in my body, so that doesn't help. But they are showing me that you're supported by somebody. He's a priest or a monk, and he's brutal.
And he's brutal. Why is he brutal?
Because I was told another time, he's going to keep taking everything away from you until you do what you're supposed to do. But, of course, nobody actually tells you what that is, which seems a bit unfair.
Because when we come down here, we have the amnesia, right?
Yeah.
I've heard this I don't know how many times. I'm going to go to another quote about the monk's path. It explores what it means to live and love when the veil between worlds begin to lift. Now, is that a reference to the veil getting thinner?
I don't think it's getting thinner. I don't think it's really ever been that thick. I think there have been people throughout history who have communicated with spirit or interdimensional entities, whatever you want to call them. I certainly think technology is helping us to move forward with this. Since the 1950s, the Vatican have been exploring EVP, and a couple of their priests have done some fantastic work. The US Navy have done it, although actually they say there's nothing in it, but they would say that, wouldn't they?
No, of course, but remote viewing, for instance, has been used since World War II, and maybe even before that. Isn't that common knowledge?
Yeah, I would think so. I think it's sort of government policy when it comes to things to do with this. Anything on the psychic side is a bit of a no-no. You're looked upon as a little bit of a fringe person if you're interested in this, and sometimes as a little bit crazy.
At the moment, you're right, but I think that's changing. And with disclosure, we've all heard that there's going to be an ET presence within the next few years. I wouldn't bet my life on it, but I keep hearing it over and over again, which seems to be consistent with people talking about ascension and moving from one dimension to the other, et cetera, et cetera. We've all heard those stories. But I'm wondering if TDC could become like some kind of a communication network with the spirit world, or is that centuries or millennia away?
I don't think it is. I think it could easily become a communication network. I think it needs somebody or some organisation with the financial clout and the expertise to be able to do it in studies that I would never be trusted with, for instance. You know, like the double-blind studies and all that kind of thing. Nobody would ever believe me unless they knew me. But I think, in going back to like the Vatican and the military, they have got the capacity to do these things, but they don't always tell us the results, what's going on.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that.
But I remember back in the 60s, one of the Catholic priests who was studying EVP went to the Vatican, or went to the Pope rather, because he was afraid that he was doing something wrong that would get him excommunicated or worse. And the Pope at the time said to him, "No, this is purely a recording. This is out there, you can hear it. So you're not messing with spirits. It's down there, I can hear it."
You brought up an interesting point earlier about double-blind studies, where I think in the future, hopefully, we'll see those type of things done with TDC and the participants and mediums. You're going to have the sitter and the psychic medium and the recording, and then interview the sitter afterwards. Very similar to how some mediums are certified. For example, Forever Family Foundation does that. I remember I interviewed a medium a while back. Her name's Siri Burnson, and she explained the process where, first of all, you can't pay for it. You can't pay to be on any list to be recommended. The certification consists of, I think, 4 or 5 Skype readings back to back, nothing about the sitter. And then the sitter is interviewed on the different responses. And what happens is they get graded. And long story made short, only about 15% actually get certified. Now, at least it does confirm that certain people will bring forth evidential findings, right? And I think that needs to happen with this as well. To me, it seems like a no-brainer.
It does. It needs a scientific approach by scientists, I guess. People who the public will trust with the results as well, if the word is to get out there. People like Dean Radin and what's the name of the guy at Arizona State? He's done some excellent work with mediums. So I think it's there for the taking, but
I think so.
You need somebody to really stand up and say, okay.
So what are the biggest takeaways for you and for us about TDC and how this could really open up more opportunities for people to really experience it, as well as for the mediums to kind of escape that stigma you referred to before, right?
It is, yeah.
I think that could help remove a lot of that, don't you?
I do. You mentioned this earlier. Now, I hadn't considered it, but with AI now, that's going to be a bit of a problem, an increasing problem, proving things like this. So it is going to have to be done in a sterile environment, if you like, or on site with the person doing it. I've found that I think it's a cognitive thing as well. The more I've done, the more you think, actually, there's no way this is fake. And I think people need to immerse themselves in subjects, not just want the quick fix, which is a big thing in the world today, isn't it? Everybody wants things now. They want to pop along, see a medium for 30 minutes and come away with the secrets of the universe. But you have to put the time in. You have to study whatever it is. You have to put the time in. It took me a long time to really get to grips with TDC. I was pushed from the other side. I was pushed by this monk who, back in the 80s and 90s, scared 2 girlfriends away by turning up. And the one said to me, "There's a monk standing on your stairs looking at me. He doesn't want me here." It was the last I saw of her. And one had happened 11 years before with a beautiful young girl. I was batting way out of my league. It was going really well. And all of a sudden she says, "There's somebody standing behind you. He's a monk. I don't like this. I've got to go."
Oh, no, that's terrible.
It is terrible. So that's where I think he's been brutal.
Yeah, okay, now I agree. He is brutal, whoever he is.
It's kind of kept me on a path, though. So at least I'm thinking, okay, different people have seen this monk. I didn't see him until last year. So I'd gone 30, 40 years without seeing this monk. But I eventually saw him. He's a bit brutal. I have used some colourful language at him sometimes.
You don't want to be scaring the young ladies away, that's for damn sure. So
No.
Yeah, please, no more brutal monks for any of us, for that matter. Rod, this is a really, really interesting journey of yours. Thanks for sharing it with us. In the meantime, how can our listeners find you online and hear some of those voices that we've been talking about today?
www.rodbradley.uk. Everything's on there.
Okay. I will definitely put that link in the show notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. In the meantime, you can find more information on closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.